Thank you very much, John, for that presentation. We have built in some time at the end of each panel and prior to the break for questions for all the speakers in each session. So we'll do that after our next speaker. So it's my pleasure to introduce Julie Sikorsky. Julie is with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. She's been there for about 16 and a half years and currently serves as the Forensic Biology Unit Manager. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in molecular biology and 2 master's degrees from Marshall University. She's a fellow of the American Board of Criminalistics and certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. Her presentation today is entitled Creating a Culture of Change, a Case Study. Please join me in welcoming Julie Sikorsky.
Good morning. Do I have a microphone? Thank you. Well, I never had the distinction of serving in the armed forces like our previous 2 speakers, but I was a Navy brat, former Navy brat, so I can relate a little bit to that culture. And while I'm not a laboratory director, I have an amazing group of people I work with every day. So first I want to start out with how honored I am to be here and how excited I am to be able to share this data with you. And I'm going to talk to you today about creating a culture of change, a case study in your laboratory. And so to begin, oh, there I am, it's big. I thought it was really appropriate to begin with this quote. And I really think that Darwin kind of should be the mascot of this academy meeting because he had the keen observation that it's not the strongest nor the most intelligent of a species that survives, but the one that is most adaptable to change. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is essentially a survival guide for you because I want us all to survive into the next millennium. I want us all to be successful in what it is we do. So, what I'm going to talk to you about is a bit of an oxymoron because I'm going to talk to you about creating a culture in your laboratory that embraces change by changing. And I'm going to do all of this in under 20 minutes. And if change is hard in the first place, changing to a culture that embraces change seems virtually impossible. But it isn't. I've seen it happen, and it happened in my laboratory. So I'm going to hit on some topics today. The first topic is why is change, especially in forensics, hard? I'm going to briefly discuss why the difference between managing versus leading, which is something that I think we all know that a manager is not a leader. I'm going to talk about becoming that change leader, someone that champions that change, as well as what I call bending the curve, and that'll become more transparent as we get there. And then I'm going to conclude with the case study, with what happened in our laboratory, the changes that we saw when we adapted this culture of change. Forensics, gotta love it. High stakes, high pressure occupation, where perfection is expected and failure is potentially catastrophic. Wow, yeah. We all might suffer from Google doesn't even know how to pronounce this. I looked it up. There are videos. It's actually kind of funny. It's okay to suffer from this. We recognize it. We release it. Change is hard, but we have to change. We recognize we have to change, especially in forensics. What causes us to change? We have these forced changes, right? We have cars that force us to change. We have new standards that come out. Okay, new standards. If we want to survive, we have to adapt to these new standards. And we have somebody decided we need more corpus loci. We have to get a new kit, change to a new kit, change to a new platform. Lots of changes, these so-called forced changes that we have to go through. So, we don't have a choice to change, though. We need to change. We need to adapt. We need to be better. Our customers deserve that. Crime laboratories, we're held at such a high standard, we have to change. So I'm going to introduce something called the change curve, and many of you may be familiar with this change curve. It's called the Kubler-Ross change curve. It was developed in the 1960s. It was really adapted from the stages of grief. And you can kind of see by the emojis here that we go through basically 3 phases of change. And if you think about the loss in grief, or it is a change. So when you're changing a platform or you're changing something in your laboratory, you're losing something. And it is potentially, you have to go through this grieving process, or many people go through this grieving process, and how much it varies does vary from person to person, but the first phase is kind of this denial phase. Change is not happening. Nope, you can tell me you're gonna change, but this isn't really happening. I'm not gonna do this. Then we kind of get angry about it. And we look for someone to blame. Why are we changing? Whose fault is this? I feel uncomfortable with this. It's my manager's fault. It's my technical leader's fault. It's the crime lab director's fault. This change. And then we kind of move into this acceptance phase, which is change is here. It's happening. We have to do it. We might as well embrace it. And then we kind of get into this whole thing that's like, why weren't we doing this 10 years ago? And it's absolutely amazing how this cycle continues. So what I'm going to talk to you about is changing this curve, creating a bend in this curve. And how do you do that? How do you change a culture in your laboratory to one that appreciates change, embraces it? So I want to begin by talking about how you would do this by referencing an article by John Dyer in Industry Week in 2018. And he did a poll. He asked on the internet, if you had one word to describe the main ingredient to sustaining and expanding an improvement initiative, what would it be? And I want you to think of that improvement initiative as creating this culture of change. So that is something that you want to sustain. You want this culture change. So what is that one word? He got 100,000 responses. 100,000 responses. And he created a word cloud. And so if you don't know what a word cloud is, a word cloud is something where the more responses you get, the same response, that word becomes larger and larger. And this is the word cloud that he generated. And I don't think I need to tell the people in the back what the largest words are, because commitment and leadership are right there. Commitment and leadership. So where does that change begin? If you want to have a sustainable improvement initiative, like creating a culture of change, it begins right here, right with you. You need that culture and you need that buy-in. Those are close seconds right there. You need that. You need to move on. Another graph that was in this article, and many of us have seen something very similar, are these management styles. I know in Good to Great we have these level leaders, and then this is just a simplified one here. We've got these manager styles 1 through 4. And as you're looking at this, try and determine where you kind of fall on this. And let me preface this by saying all of these management styles are appropriate at some point. When you're going through a major disaster, you definitely want manager style 1. But what kind of manager do you want to be managed by? So what we found to be the most effective, and when you poll people, people want to feel important. They want to know that they're valued. People are full of wonderful information because you're one person. You don't have all the answers, and I know I'm singing to the choir here. So do you want to be that dictator, level 1, or that style 1? Do you want to be that dictator? I don't think your staff is going to be very responsive to that, your scientists. You want to work towards that style 4, where you fully empower your team to move forward. You give them the vision, the mission, what you kind of see as success. You set up those guardrails, and you let them operate right in there. You let them figure it out. Super simple, right? Super simple. My talk is now over, right? You can take that back. Just give your people the power. What's the problem? What's the challenge that we have with that? This guy, girl, gal, managers, supervisors, leaders, we can't get out of our own way because what do you mean? What do you mean? You're telling me to let my people go solve problems? Have you seen the size of my backlog? You want me to pull them off of casework to go figure out problems? You've got to be insane. And if I do this, what if they go rogue? Am I going to lose all control? And what's my management going to think? We fear a loss of control as managers. I think type A personality right here. I can do it all. I can fix all our problems. The thing is, I have to recognize that I'm not the best person to fix these problems. So we fear this loss of control. So what do? We have to make the decision to try to embrace the fact that we have this fear of letting go and maybe risking a little bit of loss of productivity, but I guarantee you're gonna get it back. I guarantee it. So now that everyone in this room has said, all right, I'm gonna try to be uncomfortable. I'm gonna try and see what happens. What does our new normal look like? So you're now going to become a change leader. You're gonna champion change in your lab. So this new normal, what are you gonna do? You're gonna value insight from inside and out. Who's the best person to solve a problem? The person that is closest to that problem. I'm not the best person to solve a problem in the laboratory. I sit at a desk. I put out fires all day long. You want me to figure out how the best way to process a 3500 plate to improve that process? No, you want the person who's actually been doing that work. But you also should bring in people from the outside that might not actually be exposed to that process on a daily basis, because they might have that, why are you doing it that way? Wouldn't it be easier to do it this way? Because they can see the forest through the trees. Think how much your morale will be boosted if your employees actually have a say in how their processes are improved. And I like to say a little story here, and it always drove me nuts as a kid. My mom and dad made me pay for stuff out of my own money because they always wanted to teach me this lesson that you appreciate things more when you pay for them yourself. And it's kind of the same thing here. If you're involved and invested in a process, you're gonna appreciate that process. You're gonna own that process. So one of the things I'm gonna ask, kind of a question here, and this is a little take home for you, is who uses the worksheets in your laboratory? It's not a tricky question. The analysts who do the work, right? They're using the worksheets. Have you ever asked them if they like the worksheets that they're using? Have you ever asked them what they would change about those worksheets? Now tell them they can. Give them the power to change those worksheets. Empower yourself to empower your people. Make that one small step. We all know what Webster says about a team. You can't make all the changes because a team can't consist of one person, type A or not. Together, working together towards a common goal. Everyone in that lab has the same goal you do. Put those cases out, highest quality, and if you don't have that same goal, you should sit down and define that. Empower your team. Give them the ability to suggest, make, and enact that change. And I know it's gonna be scary, but you gotta do it. Trust that team. You've set the guardrails up. You set those guardrails up. You and your technical leader said, you know what, here's safe zone. Figure out what works for you. You will get employee buy-in and ownership to that process. You saw this in the beginning. This is that change curve that I was talking to you about, where we've got this emotional roller coaster going on here when we go through change. And the goal of a successful change management process is to bend that curve into one that kind of looks like that. It's not as scary of a ride when half your people are already in the car. So you might have a little bit of dips and valleys, but you're gonna shorten that curve, and the drops aren't gonna be so severe. People are going to accept change that they champion. And this next thing that I'm going to bring up here is right here. This is something that one of the people in the unit said this to me, and I just was like, I love that. I love that. Change doesn't have to happen to you, it can happen for you. And that's kind of the mantra that I think we really embrace when we created this culture of change. And this was a direct quote that we've adopted and we kind of think about. We remind ourselves sometimes, because change is still hard. It's not going to get easier, but when you do it more often, it just becomes regular and kind of more accepted. And we said, if it makes your life easier and it doesn't violate any standards, why can't we entertain doing it? Why can't we? I mean, change is hard for us. Some of us have a little bit too emotional attachment to our protocols and procedures because maybe we're the ones that wrote them. We've got to really let go of that control. And for some of you, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, I totally take input from my staff. I really want to know what they think. But have you actually told them that? Have you verbalized that to them? Have you said, hey, I want to hear your ideas? You may think that, but you really need to set those expectations. So that kind of ends kind of the instructional portion of my talk, and I really want to just spend the last bit of my talk talking about our culture change journey. We now have a culture that embraces change, and this journey was not easy. It was not easy. There were tears, lots of tears. Kind of shocking to me. There were times I just wanted to abandon this entire journey because too many tears. But it was worth it. It was really, really worth it. And our change journey began with a Lean Six Sigma project. Now, don't moan, because I know everybody talks about how amazing Lean Six Sigma is, which it is. And what I'm here to tell you is that you don't have to do a Lean Six Sigma project to create a culture of change, but that was the vehicle that made us so successful with our project. So, in 2015, as I suspect many of you guys also have, responding to a critical backlog, or chronic and critical, we underwent a 5-month-long grant-funded Lean Six Sigma project. Thank you, NIJ. And I'm not going to tell you about reducing defects, getting rid of waste, or any of that, but I want to tell you what the kind of the core is of Lean Six Sigma, and it's all about people. It's about their ability to change, adapt, and improve. And I didn't actually realize this is what we were doing until after the project was over. In preparing for this talk, I actually went back in my binder, and these two next things were in there, and I was like, wow, I didn't even notice that. I was so focused on improving efficiency, I didn't realize actually what was happening to us while we were doing that. It's about creating a culture that has a well-managed change process. In other words, bending that curve. And for us, Lean Six Sigma gave us the tools to create that culture of change. So we went through this 5-month-long Lean Six Sigma process. We adapted, we created a culture of change. And now I'm going to show you the results, which I think are absolutely amazing. We're about 4 years out from our first Lean Six Sigma project. Our average DNA case turnaround time has decreased by 45%. Originally it was 150 days to 83 days, and this does include our lead time. Our average DNA case output has increased by 76%. And if you're thinking, okay, what's that staffing change in there? We actually have only netted an increase of 1 DNA analyst. And what we're doing today isn't necessarily what we were doing at the end of our Lean Six Sigma project, but it's that culture of change. Okay, as these new challenges came in, how did we adapt to those changes? Our backlog has decreased by 74%. I'm going to show you a curve of our backlog and some of the additional fund that happens, as in most crime laboratories. We did have some agency funding. I want to be completely transparent, and normally that was increased when we kind of had a major event to help us, be able to recover from a backlog increase. One thing we didn't predict, and as John alluded to in the previous presentation, that Paul's speaker was like, oh yeah, this is going to happen, but no one told us about this, was that when we make customers happy, they want more of us. So our case demand has increased 68% since we went through our Lean Six Sigma project. And I don't want to discourage you from doing an efficiency initiative. I think they're fabulous, but this is one of the downsides. So we're now, from a 51 requests per month, we're now at 111 requests per month, which we're a small to medium-sized lab. We serve a population of 1.4 million people. Right now, we have roughly 6.5 DNA analysts, so that's a lot. So this is our backlog curve. You can see where we started our Lean Six Sigma project. And then we got a gift in 2016, Senate Bill 636 passed, and we got an unfunded initiative to test all sexual assault kits, which is fabulous. We need this, but there was no funding behind it. We had to use our culture of change to figure out how we were going to deal with this. So you can see our curve kind of flattened a little bit. And then we implemented StarMix, and we did see a bump in our backlog. And we knew this was going to happen. We'd actually looked at other laboratories. We knew this was going to happen. This is where we did some extra outsourcing so that we could recover from that. And now we're back on the downward slope down. This quote gave me chills. This was something that we polled our analysts once the dust settled after our culture change initiative. We said that we asked them for their quotes, and I am running out of time, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. But the highlighted words are really what the take-home is. The morale is higher. I have empowerment to make and suggest changes. New culture, work and think together. Amazing. But with all good changes, you have to maintain that change. So what do? We have process improvement days, where we set aside a day for the staff to come together and actually just, what do you like? What do you not like? Let's move together. And I may step out of the room. The technical leader may step out of the rooms to facilitate better conversations. We also have solution ideas and job jars, which are just on the wall. Put up a sticky note. Do you have a suggestion for improvement? Do you have something that you think could be better? Let's put them up there. Do you have a wish list? What's going to make your life easier? What's going to make you more efficient? So, in conclusion, change is good, but continuous change is better. So practice that philosophy of continuous change. And I'm not talking about making these massive changes from day to day where you're making these giant steps. Just do little incremental changes. Take that exercise back where you ask people about your forms. It's kind of amazing what happens, how people light up when you ask them what they think. And so in conclusion, some of you are aware of the word Kaizen and its continuous improvement. But if you actually look at what the Japanese characters mean, change is good. So just a few acknowledgements. I want to acknowledge our Lean Six Sigma teams. We've undergone 2 projects, both of which have been massively successful. Second one was a lot easier because we already had established this culture of change. And there are 2 individuals here at the Academy meeting today. Congratulations, they completed the Leadership Academy, but Brandy Pleen and Stacy Brenner are here today. I encourage you to seek them out and talk to them about this. It was life-changing, and we have this amazing team. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'm going to invite John and Mr. Knowles to come back up to the panel. We have time for a bit of a Q&A session. I understand there's some microphones in the audience. Brooke is just taking care of that. And once we have the panel up here, we'll invite some questions from the floor.
I know.
Any questions from the floor?
We answered them all.
Maybe I'll just get things started while I get folks out of the shy mode. So both John and Julie, you talked a little bit about how Lean Six was important in the transformation that you undertook in your labs. What specifically about Lean Six can you share that enabled you to make a change that you couldn't have otherwise had?
Want me to go? For us, I think it was just we were forced to dedicate time to look at something we knew could be better, but because it was such a formalized project and it cost a lot of money, they knew we needed to invest the right amount of time to actually ensure the success of that project, and we had buy-in from our chain of command that we were given this time to work on it, because every day you're so busy working these cases and you know things could be better, but when you have that focused time, you can make that improvement, and that's probably one of the biggest things, because I thought I was going to be able to put people. They were going to do some casework and then also work on Lean Six Sigma. No. They literally need to be full-time on this project. So I think that was one of the biggest realizations that I had.
Many of the same things. So we had, as I mentioned, we had been through a period of time in which our laboratory had gone through some very difficult times. My predecessor was a retired appellate court judge. And so if you can imagine a judge walking in, when he speaks, everybody listens. And he had gone to see a Lean Six Sigma presentation at a conference somewhere with some regional lab directors. And he brought it back and said, we're going to do this. And so he, from his level and from our Attorney General level, they gave us that top oversight to say, this is worth our time, worth the investment, we're going to do this. And we dedicated the time to do it. It took us 6 months to go through it. Bringing in folks, outside experts. And I think that was the other piece for us too, is that we had an outside person coming in to lead it and help us through it. It wasn't somebody from the inside saying, you're going to change, because it's already been said that change is difficult and challenging for us. And it gets even harder as we get older.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? I could ask questions all day,
We're ready for the break.
Tony, I'd like to follow up on the idea of change and empowering, and I was interested in the conversation and your presentation there about empowering, and I had to reflect back on the Marine Corps days, and I think that the most effective, in looking back organizationally, the most effective unit that I have seen is a Marine fire team. Now, a fire team is made up of 4 Marines, and they are a part of a platoon. But the platoon commander is a lieutenant, an infantry officer. He's not the one who should solve the problems. But if you turn it over to the fire team, trust me, those 4 Marines will figure out what to do, what the solution is. You just give them the direction. And I so appreciated the idea of giving direction and then stepping back. And that's what's hard to do. I would consider myself that style 1,
Type A?
style 2, you get over here. And I would tell you, as I said earlier in mine, after 56 years of marriage, I'm a 4. My wife, she's the one who runs this place. And that's okay. And that's okay, and it's worked out very well. But it's so difficult to step back and empower. But that's what you have to do.
You do, yeah.
So I have a question for each of the panel members, and that would be over here. I guess I can stand.
Oh,
sorry.
there.
So a question for the panel members would be, I think including our staff and being those change agents is great. And we have so many different changes going on at the same time. How can you help them from not being overwhelmed by all of the change and the different projects going on at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start the ball rolling. So our entire staff is empowered, and one of the things we actually learned through Lean Six Sigma, one of the hardest lessons we learned through Lean Six Sigma, was communication cannot be understated. Like, if you think you're communicating, you're not. If you think you're over-communicating, please communicate more. And I think anytime any change is going on, or even you're thinking of changing, you need to involve everyone. Just give them a brief. You know, you might have some teams working on these massive changes that you're undergoing, but those teams should be informing everyone else of the progress that they're making, so that your change curve doesn't dip immediately and you kind of have a little attenuation there, so that people kind of know it's coming. You're getting them used to the idea, and they kind of know where the project is. So, because you can't manage, everybody can't be involved in everything. But communicate, communicate, communicate.
I'll just add what Julie said. I wrote down very quickly 4 things that kind of brought us to where we are in North Carolina. You're right, you can get overwhelmed with all the different things that have to happen. You saw the list that we're actually involved in currently, but it's that collaboration and empowerment. When you allow folks to get involved and make decisions, it creates that transparency. Nobody's wondering what's going on. So there's the transparency piece of it. But then to help manage that, we adopted production meetings. So in each discipline, even my command staff, my senior leaders, we get together every Monday, 10 minutes in my office, here's what's going on, here's what happened last week, here's what we got going on next week. Again, it makes us aware, at least at the senior level, is there something I need to get involved in? Is there something I need to pick up the phone and call somebody to help move something along? And then finally, for leaders, and this is really the toughest one for all of us, something called tactical patience. And I say tactical patience because it's very close to the problem itself. You have to, as a senior leader, all of us are, we have to step back and let things happen. And don't keep your thumb on the pulse wanting to know what's going on. You just got to step back and be quiet and watch and let them do what they need to do and give them time to do it.
I would agree, and I reflect back where I became that control freak. If you want to be a control freak, become a catcher, because you are in charge of the field of play. You call the pitch, you set the tone, the patience, but you also get to see everybody perform. But when something goes wrong at second base or first base, you can't reach out and start criticizing that person for making an error. Errors are okay. Errors are okay. You can recover from that, but don't be critical. Once you empower somebody, don't start criticizing because they did something wrong. You gave them that authority there. Step back, and as John says, be patient. Let it happen. Don't be a catcher. That's not what you want to be.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? I have one question for Mr. Knowles. So over your lengthy career, you've experienced and observed a lot of change both in law enforcement and forensic science. And I wonder now, as you reflect on that and as you look ahead, what inspires you the most about looking forward at the future, and what scares you the most, both in terms of law enforcement and forensic science?
Probably, and it's a subject that I'm not the expert in. And for instance, in DNA and databases, there has to be, yes, we make all this progress for what we think is the right reason, but there's an ethical standard somewhere that we can't misuse our databases, and we can't misuse all the progress that we're making here for our purposes here. We have to respect the rights. We should do that. Respect the rights of the accused and pursue the truth here. My concern is that we go too far, and we see that a little bit, and we're getting some, I say we, collectively, databases can be invasive. And for instance, my DNA could be used to prevent me from getting insurance coverage, because they know what's going to happen to me if my DNA database is misused here. That would be one concern. But I'm really excited what's happening on the law enforcement when we're looking out for officer safety. We're doing things better. And I gave that example in New York City. With GPS, we don't now need to do a bumper lock surveillance. We have the technology, but we have to use it in a smart way. As long as we have the leaders coming to a meeting like this and understanding the issues of change and how to use new technology, then we'll be miles ahead. And that's where I'm excited about getting rid of serial offenders. I'm just so disgusted that the BTK, he operated 31 years or 50 years without being identified here. But that's my excitement.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap this session to a close. We are going to take a break until 10:40 when the second session starts. I'd ask you to please visit the conference app, the EventMobi app, to submit your presentation evaluations. It's feedback that's very helpful to the ASCLD Planning Committee in preparing each year. So with that, I'd like to thank our session today, Mr. Knowles, John Bird, Julie Sikorsky for an excellent panel. Thank you. Thanks, that's great.
Thank you so much.
You got a great style.